Wherever you go, there's signs. There's road signs. There's signs where it said, don't go here, go there. You cannot turn right. You cannot turn left. No U-turns. The signs telling where you're going, where have you been. So, question for you. If you're driving and you see a sign in front of you that says sharp curve ahead, do you focus on the road ahead of you or keep looking for other signs? You keep focused on the road ahead of you because the sign told you there's a sharp turn coming. And you don't want to veer off the road and go be Elvis and Louise and go, off the cliff. But looking up definitions is what I do when I want to tell you what signs mean. Sign is basically conveys information about something or someone else. In every single definition about a sign, the word symbol is used. And a symbol is very much like a sign. It represents something that it's not. So it's true of road signs, signs and symbols of mathematics, and any other kinds. It shows us something else. It points us to someone else. In the last chapter of John, it's not up here, John tells the reader the main reason why. It's kind of weird that way. A lot of times the books tells you within the first chapter the reason why the book is written. The Apostle John waits until the last chapter to tell you why he wrote the book. He basically says that he records several of Jesus' signs in order to develop the reader's faith. The audience of the Gospel of John are the first century Jewish Christians who were under great persecution. So John is telling these people, the guy that you're trusting your soul to is the guy, God in the flesh. So you're not suffering persecution in vain. So John is encouraging his audience. See, we're going to look at all 8 signs. Depending on who you read, before I took the Gospel of John by Elmer Towns, he's the co-founder of Liberty University, and he's also about 90 years old, so he's still actually a professor at Liberty. And I met him for the first time at 15. I went to a Sunday school seminar, and at the time I was a teaching assistant to our second grade teacher. So I went, and real nice guy. He might be about this tall. And then I was able to visit Liberty when I was a junior in high school, and I witnessed him teaching face to face, and he had like 400 kids in this classroom. And he just so happened had a pop quiz. And here's this little old man going, all right, everyone, put your books away, get a paper and pencil out, quick like a bunny rabbit. And as a teenager, I went, quick like a bunny rabbit? Who is this guy? But I was able to see him teach, and he says that there are 8 signs. It's like the music scale. Remember the sounds of music? Do, re, a female, D, that one. But he's saying there's actually only 7 notes, but it repeats itself. So he proposes that there are 8 signs, not 7 signs in the Gospel of John. So we're going to look at all 8 in turn, not all 8 today. We're not going to be here 5 hours. But the next 8 weeks, off and on, because there's a couple of guest stars coming up in the next couple of weeks or so, or guest speakers. But the 8 signs are the change in the water and the wine, the temple cleaning, the healing of the nobleman's son, the healing of the lame man, that's someone who's hurt, he's not lame, as like his jokes are bad, but he's disabled, the feeding of the multitude, the healing of the blind man, the rising of Lazarus from the dead, and the miraculous catch of the fish. This last one is the one that's most debated, but we're going to cover that one as well. See, John uses a different word than the other 3 Gospels. All the other, Matthew, Mark, Luke, says miracle. John says sign. See, the sign is the Greek word semeion, which basically definition is a miracle that underscores power and is generally received in awe. Like when you see it, you go, whoa. Or if you're Bill and Ted's, whoa, dude, cool. But basically, it's not just an act of itself, it's pointing you to another reason why. Jesus doesn't just do it just to say, look, let me pull a rabbit out of my hat. Look, ooh, I'm fancy. Basically, there's a reason why he did each one. See, the thing is, Jesus turned the water into wine for two reasons. One is to show that the rituals that the Jews were looking to was empty in and of themselves. And two, he was showing that he had power over creation. The reason why I always wondered that why are there so many gospels? Why are there so many signs in the book of John? Because we see different views of Jesus Christ. Every single sign shows us one nugget of truth of Jesus that most likely none of us have considered. That's why I think we're going to have a great time learning something new, or maybe reinforce what you've been taught before. But before we get started, you know what I say. Let's set the scene. Let's lay it out. We're going to a wedding. All the women go, yay! And all the guys go, ooh. There's one thing that's always the same at every single wedding. It doesn't always go smoothly. There's always a mistake or a hiccup. There's a story of a pastor who was encouraging a bride-to-be named Sue. She was hesitant. She loved her husband, but she was fearful because of her family's past. So he wanted to encourage her. So he came up, he approached the best man and went, I want you to read 1 John 4:18 to the bride. In 1 John 4:18 says, and it's not up here, it's an illustration, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. A nice verse for a hesitant bride-to-be. So he said, okay, best man, when you read this, give this caveat that I'm going to cover it in depth further into the wedding ceremony. And the best man went, okay. And the best man was not a church attender. He was one of those guys that came from Easter and Christmas. So he did not know there was a 1 John and a Gospel of John. So when his turn, he did what the pastor said and said, okay, Pastor Tom wanted me to read this verse to encourage Sue. So instead of reading 1 John 4:18, he read John 4:18. You have 5 husbands, and the one that you have now is not your husband. See, weddings don't go smoothly. So this wedding did not go smoothly. So we're going to pick up the first verse of John chapter 2. On the 3rd day, there was a wedding in Canaan of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. And both Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding. See, the chapter 2 picks up 3 days after the events of chapter 1. Chapter 1, Jesus and his disciples were in the Sea of Galilee. They're about 15, 20 miles west of where they are now. Now they're in Canaan of Galilee, which is about 5-7 miles north of Jesus' hometown. There's a map behind me so you can see where we are. See, Nathanael, one of the disciples, is from Canaan of Galilee. So he said, hey, we're having a wedding. And most likely, a lot of theologians, remember theologians are just us with an alphabet behind their name. And basically, they have educated guesses. So they're guessing that most likely the wedding party are either relatives or friends of Jesus' family. That's why they were invited to the wedding. See, weddings were very, very important to the culture of Palestine. See, when you got engaged, engagement there is a lot more serious. It was a legal contract. Most of them were arranged when the daughter was maybe 5 or 6, and the guy was at 12 going into his apprenticeship, going, okay, when Junior finished his apprenticeship, he'd be able to take care of Susie. So when they're ready, they'll get married. And the dad of the bride goes, okay, here's 20 ox, 50 sheep, and this is our agreement. So it's legally binding. So when the announcement is made when they're older, we're having a wedding. That's when they start planning the wedding. Okay, we're going to need this many things of sheep for the food, this many things of wine and water and fruit. Basically, it's huge planning. And when the Jewish people at this time thought of heaven or when the Messiah came, they thought of a banquet. That's where they went to. So a wedding banquet is very, very important to their culture because it reminded them of what to expect when they went to heaven or when Messiah came. The parable in Matthew 25, the one about the foolish and wise maidens, is a picture of what they do. See, in the middle of the night, when it was nice and cool, the bridegroom and his friends would walk from his house to the bride's house, and then they would do a parade from her house to his house, and then that's when the celebration started. It was all about festivity and fun. See, running out of wine at such an occasion was not just a hiccup, it was a legal matter. It was an embarrassment. They have, I left it out of my notes, but I came across this one guy that is a scholar of Oriental law. And he says that there's actually records of people being sued for not bringing a gift to a wedding because it was a slight. It was a shameful to the couple. Is that you did not think too highly of them, so you didn't bother about bringing a gift. So when Mary came to Jesus and went, we have a situation. It's like the PBS show, Pinky. This is serious. If you don't have any kids, that went over your head. I remember seeing that almost every day with Ripley. But this was a very serious situation. And that's where we lead to in verse 3 and 4, where it says, when the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, there is no wine. And Jesus said to her, woman, what does that have to do with us? My hour has not yet come. What was Mary asking for? You're probably thinking, wine maybe? Was she asking for him and his friends to pick up a collection and go to the nearest ABC store? What was she asking? See, the thing is, we really don't know really what it is, but those scholars have proposed the reason why that she was talking to Jesus about what can we do is that Mary knows who Jesus is. She understands that he is starting his ministry. He has followers. He's a rabbi now. He's 30 years old. At the time, at the reading of John chapter 2, he has 7 disciples. So she's saying, do something. You have authority. We need your help. She is not saying that I know that you can do something supernatural. She's saying, I need your help. Maybe she was asking him to encourage the people and went, hey, I know that we ran out of wine, but we're never told that. See, Mary had good reason to believe that Jesus is the Messiah because, remember, it's only 30 years ago she was visited by an angel. And as she remembered that visit, she remembered the prophecy of Simeon and Anna about her son. So she knew Jesus is the Messiah. So she knew Jesus could do something. And some of you, Jesse, chuckled when I said, woman. And some of you might be going, how dare he talk to his mom that way? That's just rude. Didn't she raise Jesus better? The thing is, that term woman was a polite way to address women at that time. Jesus used woman when he addressed a woman at the well. He used the same title when he approached Mary of Magdalene. But it's still strange that why did he not use the adjective mother or mom? As the Jewish and the Greek custom to identify to your parent. So saying, mom, what does that have to do with me or mother? But it's significant because it was a changing of a relationship between he and his mom. He is really not only primarily her son, but he is now the Son of Man. There's a change in their relationship. So instead of saying mom, he said, woman, what does that have to do with us? That too is not a rude question. It goes back to the Old Testament where it's written, it says here that when someone was asked to get involved in a matter he felt was not his business, they would say, "What to me and to you?" Basically, they're saying, that is your business. How am I involved? So Jesus is basically saying, woman, that's their issue, not mine. Why should I get involved? And the thing is that the reason why he says it's not my hour is that he's saying that it's not my time to manifest who I am. This is only the second week of his earthly ministry. So Jesus was not really ready to unveil who he really was. So that's where we are. And now we're going to read from verse 5 to 11, the actual sign and what it means to us. Verse 5, his mother said to the servants, "Whatever he says to you, do it." Now there were 6 stone water pots set there for the Jewish custom of purification, containing 20 or 30 gallons each. Jesus said to them, "Fill the water pots with water." So they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Draw some now and take it to the head waiter." So they took it to him. When the head waiter tasted the water, which had become wine, he did not know where it came from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew. And the head waiter called the bridegroom. And he said, "Every man serves the good wine first, and when the people have drunk freely, then he deserves the poorer wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." This beginning of his signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. We're going to examine this event and what the sign means. We're going to look at the event, the significance, and the application. This is basically the blueprints of all the signs lessons that we're going to talk about, sermons. We're going to look at the event, the significant, and how it applies to our life. So we're going to look at the event. We're not given the entire conversation between Mary and Jesus. All we know is at the end of the conversation, Mary says, "Okay, guys, this is Jesus. Do whatever he tells you to do." We know that there are 6 stone water pots. Basically, each water pot, if you've seen pictures of it, hindsight being 2020, it would have been cool if I had pictures up here, but I don't. So don't worry about looking for them. But they're about maybe this high, and they're hewn out of boulders. And they were movable, but it took anywhere between 2 and 3, maybe 4 guys to move each one. So basically, they probably spent a week or 2 before the wedding moving these concrete pots to where they were. And then they would fill them up to the brim. And basically, remember, we talked about this a few weeks ago, how the Pharisees, you have to wash just right, ceremonial. You dip your one hand out and it has to run down, and now you're righteously clean and you can eat. And then they wash both hands. Now, I want you to think about this without getting too grossed out, because we're going to cover this a little bit later. They did not have toilet paper. I don't get too graphic back then. So their left hand is what they had to use. So when they washed their hands after they ate, they washed all of it. They ate with one hand. And when they finished eating, they washed both hands. Using all 6 pots, they washed their hands. At this moment, all the pots were empty. So Jesus said, "Okay, guys, fill it up." That's part of their job, okay? Let's go to the well a couple hundred yards away. They go back and forth with pails. And they came up with between 98 to 144 gallons of water from the nearby well. Remember, this water is not designed to drink from. It's for washing. Say that you're working for a caterer and you're at a wedding and you have this big 10-gallon pot of gravy and someone spills it on the kitchen floor. So you pick it up and you start sopping the gravy back into the pot, right? And then the cook said, okay, it's time to use that gravy on the potatoes. And all you're going, ew, gross. That's what Jesus was doing. He was using unfiltered water that was some of the books I've read call them brackish water. Basically, it is from a well that wasn't a purebred well. It's basically the settlement of the dirt. So it was like muddy water is what Jesus turned. So these people would not drink it. It's from washing it. So, and remember this, the only people that knew about this miracle was Jesus, the servants, Mary, and the 7 disciples that were there. That's all who knew what was going on. Everyone else was still having a good time. Some people might be thinking, oh, I'm getting a little dry here. My goblet's kind of empty. But they're oblivious. No one else knew what was going on behind scenes. So when Jesus said, okay, guys, take your pitcher, dip it into the water, and take it to the head waiter. Put yourself in the servant's position. You know where you got that water from. You know what those water pots were for. So they're probably looking at each other and going, you take it. No, you take it. You take it. No, you take it. So that's the event. But what is the significance? What is the symbolicness of this? And that's the significance of this sign. Remember, signs were pointing to someone or someone else. So what is the changing of the water mean? I thought about this yesterday. It's not in my notes. It's free of charge. The number 7 is perfect number. It's the symbol of God. In Revelation chapter 2, there are 7 spirits, 7 candlesticks, 7 this, because 7 is the number of God. 6 is the number of man. So when you read about in Revelation, and everyone gets all, whoo, because of the Omen movies where there's a tattoo, a 666 of the beast, basically is that the number of the beast is 666, because remember, it's the unholy trinity of Satan, the false prophet, and the Antichrist. Basically, Revelation is telling them, even though that those 3 dudes were trying to be like God, they are just shy of perfection. So the number of man is 6, and we're not perfect. So Jesus is showing 6 pots who represent the number of man. He's showing us that we're not perfect. But the one who is perfect is going to fulfill what is needed to be happen. That's something that came to me yesterday. It's free of charge. Jesus, see, the Jews would not eat until they would clean, right? They're cleansed. It's a ritual cleansing. And to see the Jews were doing this for so long, they forgot basically what the rituals represented. And they forgot that Jesus, the Messiah, was going to come and fulfill what was empty. All the rituals that they were doing were emptiness. They were just going through the motion. In fact, they find out later when the veil is ripped in two that there is no Holy of Holies anymore behind that veil. No one knows when the Ark of the Covenant disappeared, but it disappeared during the 400 silent years between the Gospels. But every year that the temple was recreated, the high priest would go behind the priest, wink and nod, and sprinkle the blood against the wall because there was no more ark. They were just going through the motion. It was all emptiness. And those empty water pots were representing the emptiness of the law, the emptiness of those rituals that they were doing just to do it. See, Mary, when she approached him, she says, "There's no more wine." We can see that it symbolized the fact that the Jews had no spiritual meaning left in their ceremonies. The Old Testament wine was often seen as a gift and a symbol of blessings from God. But why did Jesus turn the water into wine? Jesus turned the water into wine to prove that He's the source of life. He changed the water into wine to symbol that there is new spiritual life in himself. Not in the ritual, but in himself. Jesus turned the water into wine because it changed one element to another, which symbolized a marriage. See, remember, Jesus betrothed the nation of Israel to himself in Egypt. And then they were married on Mount Sinai when he gave them the Ten Commandments. And he repeatedly called them to be a faithful spouse to himself. A lot of the minor prophets were basically allegories on the fact that Israel was not a faithful spouse to God, even though God is a faithful husband to Israel. One such allegory is Ezekiel chapter 16. I think it was Hosea is actually the whole book, is that God told Hosea to marry a prostitute to be a living example of, and writing down that basically Israel is the prostitute and God is the faithful husband to her. So it was basically, that's why he changed the water and the wine. Jesus turned the water into wine to prove that the old covenant lacked the resources to meet Israel's spiritual needs. Since these water pots were ceremonial cleansing, it showed that it was emptiness. It was ritual. Jesus turned the water into wine to reveal his nature to his disciples. Remember, who was the audience? It wasn't the wedding party. It wasn't the headmaster. All these people were oblivious of what happened. The people that were in attendance was Mary. She already knew Jesus is the Messiah. It was the servants. They didn't know who this guy was. Disciples, they were the audience of this. He showed them who his nature was. He showed that he had power over creation. See, basically Jesus sped up the whole photosynthesis process. He didn't turn something that wasn't there into something else. He basically, remember, water, when you use water to water grapes, it produces wine eventually. So he just sped it up. So he had power over creation. Remember when we looked at the Christmas factor, the God factor, in John chapter 1, that Jesus is the creator? So he is power over creation. And I wanted to cover this, and I actually had this note before. Rick sent me a text yesterday about make sure to tell the people it was non-alcoholic wine. And all I replied back was, I have it in my notes. And it is. It's right here. And I'll read it for you so I don't get it wrong. And basically, this is also depending on your vantage point. It depends on where you start. Some denominations, they use real wine in their communion. So they have a skewed way of looking at this. But the reason why I have this, because I'm covering what the Bible tells us, what culture tells us, and what history tells us. That's hermeneutics. That's that $25 word I like to use. It's the science of interpreting Scripture. You don't use the 21st century American culture to read the Bible. You use the culture at the time and the history of the time to tell us what the Bible means. I'm not looking at it as an independent Baptist white dude from the 21st century in America. Through the eyes of the culture, through the eyes of how it was written in the original script, Jesus did not create intoxicating wine. We know this because there's two separate words in both the Hebrew and Greek that says wine. One is fermented grape juice, and the other one is this grape juice, but they use it interchangeably. But the thing is, the Old Testament prohibits drunkenness, and it even says you're not even supposed to look at it. So being a Jewish rabbi, Jesus would not go against the Old Testament. In fact, the fermented process needs yeast to create wine. Yeast is a symbol of sin. So just as Jesus had no sin in himself, the wine that he had in the Last Supper and the same wine that we take in our communion has no yeast in it because he had no sin in himself. So this is grape juice. So when the head banquet guy got the wine, he said, wow, this is some good stuff. This is great wine, the best wine, because it was the freshest wine. Basically, if you have your own grapes and you smashed it up, like basically fresh orange juice, and drink it the same day, that's what the head waiter or the master of the banquet said. Wow, this is fresh grape juice. My biggest thing when we do communion is not to react to the Whelpster's grape juice because it always gets me right here. When I was a kid, I always made a face. So when I'm up front, I'm doing it in my head, but not my face because I'm a professional amateur. Don't try this at home. But it is grape juice. But now it leads us to our last one is the application. Some of you might be going, you might be like me. I love getting into the nitty-gritty. I remember back in the early 90s when the Channel E Entertainment Television first came out, I would watch it and I would get the behind the scenes of the movies before I watched it. I love finding out the story and how they created it. And even now on Disney Plus, like watching the behind the scenes of all, even it's almost 50 years old now, how they created Star Wars. That's how I am. I like to know the backstory and the nitty-gritty and the depth of what we're reading. And you might be like me. And some of you might be going, what does that have to do with me? How is this going to help me in my day in, day out? That's one of the lessons I learned while we were at Common Ground Community Church, the 9 years we were with them as an executive pastor. The lead pastor, Roger, he will forget more Bible in more detail than I would ever learn. But his thing is that he doesn't always apply it to people. He gives the nitty-gritty, but he just left people chewing the steak. And this is some meaty stuff, but someone sometimes left it out of how you can apply it to your life. Some of you might be going, you know what, Tom? This is cool stuff, but how am I supposed to use this to pay my bills tomorrow? This is some good stuff, but how am I supposed to get past my physical ailment? How is this going to help me with my wayward child? So I want to apply it in our lives. What can we take away from the water into wine sign? I'm glad you asked. The first thing is that we need to take the signs as they're given. See, the liberal theologians will say the sign was like this. Okay, there was this wedding, and they ran out of wine. So this guy, Jesus, the rabbi, told the servants to give water to the head guy. The head guy took the water, drank the water, and he knew he didn't want to embarrass the bride and groom, so he went, wink, this is some good wine. And then some other people at the wedding got the joke and went, oh yeah, this is good wine, this is good wine. Basically, they were drinking water, but faking like it was water. Like guys, when you had the little tea parties with your daughter, going, this is good tea, sweetheart, but is this water? That's not what it is. As a theologian and as a Christ follower, when the Bible tells us something happened, we believe it happened. It happened. This was a miracle that points us that Jesus is the creator, that he has power over creation. The second thing is, while the sign appears to be an exercise of supernatural power, and it was, our Lord was reluctant to perform it. We're not sure why he was reluctant, but I can suppose or guess is that he was not ready to shout the rooftops who he was. And also, he probably didn't want to do it is because his mom needed to learn her new position. So she needed to know her place. Not to say that as a rude thing, is that because, see, for 30 years, Mary was Jesus' mom. Whatever Mary told Jesus to do, he would do as a dutiful son. Now, their relationship shifted. He was reluctant to do what she wanted him to do because he wasn't on her calendar. He was on the Father's calendar. So she did not know the ins and outs, the details like Jesus did. So that's why he was reluctant to do this. See, and this tells us is that we need to know our place. We do. We know that we can get a little too familiar with God sometimes. It's like, I remember I was praying over something a few weeks ago and being super spiritual. I said, God, let your will be done. And I meant it. And God's will was done. The door didn't open. And I remember one morning in my prayer closet, which is my shower, and I'm thinking, okay, God, you know what I'm thinking. I'm not happy about what happened. I know your will was done, but you know what? I'm not happy. But I yield to your will. Some of us think God is a genie, and you rub the lamp, and your wish is your command. No, he is not a genie. Your wish is not his to command. He will do what he knows is best for us. It may not be pleasant. It may not be fun. But when it's all said and done, we're here to bring him the glory. I have a saying that I tell Ripley all the time. Pain is a good reminder. Meaning that when you make a mistake and you get hurt because of that mistake, you look back on it and went, yeah, I'm not going to do that again. And I'm reminded my little scar is not as deep as it was. The last year of my freshman year at Baptist Bible College, we were being stupid guys. Finals are over, summer break's coming, we're being stupid. Some guys down the hallway had taken those wooden shish kebab sticks and made bows and arrows at them. So they're running around shooting everyone. One hits you, it sticks in you. It was. Ow. So they're chasing me down, and all I'm thinking is that across from our shower bathroom is the resident assistant or dorm mom. So I'm running at 19 years old fast. And I went to duck in, and water was everywhere. I hit the water, slid. I'm laughing because I remember the guy's name was Bumper John Lantry. And he was a football player, and he legally changed his name to Bumper because that was his nickname in high school. Yes, lady, boys are stupid. But I'm running, and I slip, and my hand hits just right at the door frame. From the back, he thought my head hit the door frame, and he was freaking out. He's like, Tom, 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 Tom. That's my nickname from college. Are you okay? I went, yeah, I'm fine. And drip, drip, drip. There's like big old gash. And every once in a while, I'll look down, and the light will hit it just right, and I just smile because I'm stupid. And it was a reminder of not to do that again. But this is a reminder that God loves us enough that something trivial, something that was secreted, cared enough that the creator of the universe took time out of his schedule to help out a family member in their hour of need. He cares for the little, he cares for the big. He cares for the flat tire. He cares about the lost key. He cares about your bills. He cares about the lost son. He cares. Third, the miracle was not necessarily a need, it was a luxury. He was not a critical problem. We'll see the other signs was that someone was about to die or someone that was hurt for decades, he cared for them. This was not an emergency. It was not a 911. It was something else. But he acted. He cares about the little things. When the disciples went from his followers to becoming the Secret Service agents, shooing away the brats away and the non-desirables away, what did Jesus do? Know your place, let them come. He cares about the small. I'm reminded about 1 2 Kings 6, when Elijah retrieved the axe head out of the water, some people are trying to make it spiritualized, but basically God cared about the axe head, getting the axe head out of the water so that young man could make a living. He needed an axe head to split wood, to sell the wood, to make a living. So he cares. The fourth thing is that Jesus did this on the down low. Remember, who was the audience? Who was there? It was himself, his mom, his disciples, and the servants. See, the servants were there. They knew what happened. They had no idea how it happened. They were just scratching their heads afterwards. It was designed to show the disciples who their rabbi really is. See, we see that in John 2:11. It says, in the beginning of his signs, Jesus did Cana of Galilee, and the reason why manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. That is the reason why he did this sign. He did this sign for 6 guys. He turned the water into wine for 6 guys to show that I am the God in the flesh. That the emptiness of the ceremonial process, I will not only fill it, but overflow fill it with who I am. See, scholars get it wrong sometimes. It's not about the conversation between Mary and Jesus. It wasn't about helping out the bridegroom and the wife so they wouldn't be ashamed or lose face. It wasn't the actual what type of wine it was. If it was grape juice, was it fermented? It really doesn't matter. In some denominations, in some people's mind, they rather go fist royale and go down on the mat debating it ad nauseum if it was fermented or non-fermented. It doesn't matter. It matters that Jesus used this to reveal who he is to 7 guys. Think about it. What is the number of God? 7. The 7 dudes, he revealed himself. That was the first sign. And because he did this, the turning in the water into wine, Jesus showed himself to be deity. The sign pointed out that Jesus Christ cared for people's needs. The sign pointed out that Jesus Christ filled the empty rituals. The sign pointed out that Jesus Christ has power over creation. This sign points out that Jesus Christ is God in the flesh. This is our first sign that we're going to look at. Hopefully it's encouraged you and challenged you. With that, let's pray.